That's an MX-13. If you run a Kenworth or a Pete, that's probably your engine. It wasn't designed in America. 4,000 miles from here by a company you've never heard of in a country you don't associate with trucks. Its name is DAF, Eindhoven, the Netherlands. And in February 1993, the company that built it stopped existing. £1 billion of debt, and the bank said no. Today, it outsells every truck brand in Britain. So how does a Dutch trailer shop end up under the hood of your Kenworth? And why won't they sell you the truck? April 1st, 1928, Eindhoven, a Dutch city that runs on Philips light bulbs and Kolen beer. In a corner of the Kolen brewery, a blacksmith named Hub van Doorne rents floor space to weld and forge whatever the city and the Philips plant will pay for. He's 28, and the money on the workbench isn't his. It belongs to the man who runs the brewery. By 1932, the shop has a name, Van Doorne's Aanhangvakken Fabriek. Trailers and the axles under them, not a single truck. For 22 years, it builds the thing that hangs off the back of somebody else's rig. In 1936, the brewery man, Hengis, the managing director who bankrolled it from day one, pulls his money and walks. The company that would one day build Britain's best-selling truck was started on beer money. Now the brothers own the lot. Hub runs the iron, every machine in the story is his, while his younger brother Wim runs the money. Now remember that split. It's why it's Wim on the phone when the war comes. Here's the part nobody tells you, and it's hiding in plain sight on the nose of every DAF ever built. That badge, those 3 letters, DAF, was born meaning Van Doorne's Aanhangvakken Fabriek. Trailer Factory, 1949, they quietly redefined the initials, Van Doorne's Automobile Fabriek. But they never changed the letters. Nearly a century on, the badge on the nose is still the one the trailer shop wore. Here's the problem in 1934. You're a trailer shop, no engine, no chassis, nothing that moves under its own power, and you want to sell engineering to an army. Armies don't buy axles, they buy finished trucks from builders with real factories behind them. What does a welder in a brewery corner have that they'd want? The answer didn't come from Van Doorne alone. It came from a serving Dutch army officer, Lieutenant Piet van der Trappen, who co-designed the one product that made this company, and then watched his own name get swallowed by it. Trappen, Doorne, Trotto. 1934, the Trotto. It isn't a truck, it's a kit. Take any standard 2-axle road truck, and in 5 hours you bolt Van Doorne's conversion set onto the ends of the rear axle, drive branching off both sides to 2 wheels each, with enough travel to claw over broken ground. An afternoon's work turns a flat road hauler into a 6-wheeler with 4 driven wheels. DAF made its first real money not by building a truck, but by selling the parts that turned other men's trucks into something better. The Defense Department places its first order in 1935, and by May 1940 there are 1,200 Trotto trucks in Dutch service, the same drivetrain becoming the guts of the M39 Panzerwagen armored car. 4,000 miles west, International Harvester of Chicago is already an American giant, 38 years from a collision with this brewery welder, and neither knows the other's there. Then, the war lands on the factory floor. May 10, 1940, 4 M39s on that Trotto drivetrain sit in Eindhoven as the invasion begins, and it's Wim on the phone to The Hague, trying to get them out before the Germans arrive. The Hague passes him down the chain. The cars go south to Vught, handed to a division already falling back, and inside a week, they're German property. Wim keeps the factory alive through 5 years of occupation. It still won't build a truck of its own until 1949, the A30. 1 truck in 22 years. Then a full range inside 5, and a gearbox that beat the world, credited to a man who may not have built it. 1955, the Eindhoven line rolls out its 10,000th chassis, and that same year the Dutch Army places a single order for 3,600 vehicles. The military relationship that started with a bolt-on kit is now the backbone of the business, and it's about to bankroll the most important decision DAF ever made. Up to now, DAF still builds its trucks around somebody else's engine. That's the next thing to go. 1957, DAF stops bolting in Hercules and Perkins engines and opens its own engine plant, the first motors to wear a DAF badge. The heavy iron runs on Leyland license for the next 40 years, a stout, low-revving diesel that grunts instead of screams. 2 years later, it straps a turbocharger to its DD575, forcing more air in to burn more fuel and pull more out of the same iron. Sounds like a footnote. It isn't. A trailer maker building its own engines instead of renting them is the exact competence a company in Bellevue, Washington pays $500 million for 39 years later. The engine in your Kenworth doesn't start in 2010 when MX crossed the Atlantic. It starts here, in 1957. Now here's where a trailer company embarrasses the whole car industry. 1958, the Amsterdam Motor Show. DAF shows the 600. A little family car running the first continuously variable transmission anyone ever made work in volume. It's on sale by 1959. No gears to shift, a pair of belts and pulleys sliding through every ratio, dead stop to top speed. And because that belt drive worked the same both ways, the thing would run as fast in reverse as it did forward. Enthusiasts had a name for it: the rubber band car. Belt drives have been sketched since the 1880s. A Dutch trailer maker was the one who put it in a showroom, and the rest of the world wouldn't take it seriously for another 30 years. Here's what should have made DAF a household name and didn't. A fraction of the resources of the giants it keeps beating, and it keeps getting there first and staying invisible outside the Benelux. Worse, the two men most responsible for the engineering DAF is remembered for aren't the man whose name is on the building. Now, one of them you've already met, Vandertrappen, whose name is hiding inside the word Trotto. The other one is a stranger. The Variomatic gets credited almost everywhere to Hub Van Doorne, but Wikipedia's own entry hands the original development to someone else, Christoffel Sellenrod. We're not here to settle that fight. The point is, it exists, and the man who may have created DAF's most famous invention is a name almost nobody has heard. 1962, the Amsterdam Commercial Show. DAF rolls out the 2600 and cracks a problem the whole industry was stuck behind. European law capped how long the whole rig could be, tractor and trailer together, so every foot spent on the cab was a foot stolen off the payload. DAF fit a full sleeper, 2 bunks, wide glass, sprung seats, real heat, insulation between the driver and the engine, inside a cab short enough to keep the trailer legal. For the first time, a long-haul driver could actually live in the cab. They called it the mother of international road haulage in Europe. Rivals didn't applaud it, they copied it one by one. And that transmission nobody took seriously? While DAF put a CVT into production in 1959, American makers were still counting fixed gears. 2 in a Power Glide, 4 in a Hydromatic. Ever driven a car with a CVT? You've driven the great-grandchild of a Dutch trailer maker's 1958 gamble. The engineering was never DAF's problem, but engineering this good doesn't go unnoticed, and the outfit that came looking wasn't in Europe at all. It was in Chicago, and it was about to buy its way inside. Chicago could wait. To shut up everyone calling the Variomatic a gimmick, DAF went racing, and it started early. 1964, the Monaco Formula 3 race. Rob Slotemacher qualifies a belt-driven single-seater 11th and brings it home 7th. 3 years later, a Cosworth-powered Variomatic wins outright at Brands Hatch against a top-class field. The rubber band gearbox beating proper racing cars. By 1968, the point is being made in daylight. A DAF 55 wins the Alpine Rally. Slotemacher runs 1/17th of 100 cars through the 16,000-kilometer London-Sydney Marathon on a belt and pulley gearbox nobody thought could survive it. 1970 to 1973, a works driver named Jan de Rooij takes 4 straight Dutch International Rallycross titles in the DAF 555 four-wheel drive. And by 72, a 200-horsepower Ford BDA screaming through a Variomatic bolted in where the passenger seat should be. Remember that name, Jan de Rooij. 16 years from now, he comes back driving something that makes the 555 look tame. 1,200 horsepower, 2 engines, 1 truck. And what happens to it ends DAF's racing for good. March 1972. Here's where America walks into the story for the first time. International Harvester of Chicago, one of America's biggest manufacturers, buys a third of DAF, 33% of a brand new company with an option for more. DAF pours everything industrial in: trucks, bus chassis, special and military vehicles, trailers, marine and industrial engines, keeping only the cars out. So ask it now and don't answer yet. If this company had been American-run from the States, would it have survived what's coming? It's not hypothetical. It was tried right here. For a while it holds. Then it sours. October 1978. Pete Van Dorna, DAF's president, says the company stays independent no matter who holds shares. April 1980. Harvester's VP of Marketing, Robert Radcliffe, says out loud they're looking at exercising the option, and the shares will come out of the Van Dorna family's own block. Harvester takes them, 37.5%. Then that October, the Dutch find out what their partner's been up to on the side. Harvester has signed a deal with ANASA, the Spanish maker of Pegaso trucks, on terms that look a lot like DAF's own. DAF's barely off its knees, and its own partner is buying into a company that could be its European rival inside 5 years. The Dutch answer isn't a boardroom fight, it's a filing. They register the joint venture, Bedrijfsvakanfabriek, DAF, as a Structuurvennootschap, a large company under Dutch law, instead of the ordinary NV everybody had assumed it would be. That one classification makes a supervisory board mandatory, and that board can veto anything the management decides. In a single stroke, Harvester still owns 37.5% and controls nothing. Harvester took it to the Dutch courts. November 1981, it loses. A Dutch company had used its own government's law to strip its American owner of every vote, and it made it stick in front of a judge. June 1983, Harvester sells 2/3 of its stake, drops the rest in a trust, and America is out. And Harvester wasn't just outmaneuvered, it was drowning while it fought. $4.5 billion in debt, 200 lenders keeping it out of bankruptcy. Around all of it, the machine keeps moving. 1975, DAF sells its whole car division and the Bourne plant to Volvo, cutting loose everything that isn't a truck to throw every engineer it has at the one thing it means to win, the tractor unit. And on the 23rd of May, 1979, Hub Van Dorna dies at 71. The blacksmith gone before the story ever gets interesting. November 1981, America loses its grip on DAF in a Dutch courtroom. January 1983, the Surface Transportation Assistance Act of 1982 is signed into law. It forbids the states from putting an overall length limit on a tractor-trailer at all, and guarantees the trailer 48 feet no matter how long the tractor in front of it is. Until then, the cab sitting on the engine, existed in America for one reason. It was short, and every foot you saved on the tractor went into the trailer. Once the law stopped counting the tractor, the shape had no reason to exist, and within a few years, America threw it away. DAF's entire range is that shape. Harvester had already lost its grip 14 months before that law landed. By the June after it, Harvester was gone from Eindhoven for good. And DAF? DAF was about to build the fastest truck in the desert, and nearly die doing it. (1987) DAF launches the 95, and it's flatly the best truck the company has ever built. An all-new cab, an 11.6-liter engine up to 380 horsepower, a 16-speed ZF box, and soundproofing so obsessive the gear linkage is telescopic, built to stop a single vibration from climbing the lever into the cab. Quieter at speed than a lot of luxury cars. International Truck of the Year, 1988. And here's the twist you were set up for. That cab was co-developed with ANASA, the Spanish outfit whose side deal with Harvester started the fight that pushed the Americans out of DAF. And DAF needed a partner precisely because Harvester was gone, and somebody had to help pay for the cab. The company that triggered the betrayal helped design DAF's finest hour. That same year, DAF ropes itself to Britain, merging with Leyland Trucks and Freight Rover to become Leyland DAF. June 1989, it floats on the Amsterdam and London exchanges. 1990, it splits off its bus division as United Bus, doubling in size and splitting itself apart at once, and in 1990 it loses 150 million guilders in a single year, expansion outrunning the money. Now, watch what a company supposedly on its deathbed does for an encore. 1988, the DAF 95 Turbo Twin. Two 11.6-liter inline sixes bolted side by side, one driving each axle, 3 turbochargers apiece. A flat bellow with a hard whine layered over it. 1,220 horsepower, 4,700 newton meters, 3,400 pound-feet, 220 kilometers an hour, flat out. 137 miles an hour, in a truck. On the 1988 Dakar, Jan de Rooij, the rallycross man you were told to remember, blows past R.A. Vatanen's Works Pugo at over 180 kilometers an hour and runs third overall by the 8th stage, ahead of both factory cars. This is not a company that lost its nerve. The engineering peaked at the exact moment the accounting collapsed. By 1992, Leyland DAF is roughly £1 billion in debt. Two things dug that hole: the aggressive expansion after the merger and the money poured into a new model development, and the new model was the 95. Then, the floor gives way underneath both of them. UK truck sales fall from 70,000 in 1989 to 31,000 in 1991. And here's the cruel part. One business inside the dying company was perfectly healthy. The vans, Freight Rover, were still healthy, while the trucks dragged everything under. The one healthy piece was the piece the rescue couldn't afford to keep. Back to the desert for the payoff nobody wanted. On the 8th stage of that same 1988 Dakar, the second turbo twin, the X2, rolls its speed. It cartwheels 6 times and throws its navigator, Kees van Leeuwenhoek, from the cab. He doesn't survive. The organizers canceled the truck category for the 1989 outright, the official reasoning being that the twin-engine 1,000-horsepower trucks had simply become too dangerous. Trucks come back the following year on a leash with a speed limit, and DAF is finished with racing. It pulls the surviving truck out mid-rally, shuts the program down, and sells the equipment to DeRoy. He doesn't enter another Dakar for 14 years. DAF built a machine so far past what anyone thought possible that the race changed its own rules to stop it, and then walked away from the sport entirely. The fastest truck in the desert couldn't outrun the balance sheet. 5 years later, the banks stopped taking DAF's calls. 1:30 in the afternoon, the 2nd of February 1993, Leyland DAF Limited goes into receivership and stops belonging to the people who built it. That same afternoon, a man called Murdoch McKillop is told that he and his colleague John Talbot of the accountancy firm Arthur Anderson are the ones being sent in. The next morning, they're appointed joint administrative receivers, and the line goes quiet. Not slowed, stopped. The thing that blacksmith started in the brewery corner belongs to a receiver now, to be carved up and sold for whatever the pieces bring. Here's how a company that builds some of Europe's best trucks ends up on a receiver's table. By late 1992, the debt's around £1 billion and DAF needs a rescue. It nearly gets one. The Dutch government was willing to underwrite the loans. The Belgian government was willing to underwrite the loans. The British government was not. And the merger contracts, drawn up 6 years earlier, said the Dutch would only ever shore up their own side of the business, never Leyland's. Then the banks, the company's own lenders, refused to fund the rest. Two national governments overruled by their own bankers. DAF NV files for protection against its creditors, and it isn't the only DAF business dying that year. United Bus, the bus arm spun off in 1990, goes under in 1993 too, and gets carved into 4. With VDL taking the old DAF bus. 2 DAF companies gone inside 12 months. Now here's the fact that rewrites everything you just watched. In 1993, the year the company legally died, DAF built 4,957 trucks. The next year, same plants, same workers, same tooling, dead parent company. It built 20,000. 11,000 out of Eindhoven alone. Read that again. 4 times the output, 12 months after the receivers walked in. The engineering was never the problem. The company wrapped around it was. So ask it a second time and don't answer. If this had been a company in Washington State instead of the Netherlands, would the banks have been allowed to win? So, who saved it? Not a white knight, not a rival with deep pockets. The people who ran the places. It's a management buyout. 3 of them. Joe Gilchrist, a British plant director at Leyland, buys Leyland trucks back out of the receiver's hands, but can only scrape up enough for the truck and parts, not the vans. The money won't stretch, so Allen & May assembles a separate consortium to buy the van business and names it LDV, keeping the letters familiar so the customers don't blink. And in Eindhoven, the restructured DAF Trucks NV survives on the one thing no commercial buyer would offer. The Dutch and Flemish governments take majority of its shares, because nobody in the private market will touch it. Managers buying their own factories back out of a receivership, 2 governments standing in as shareholders of last resort. That's what keeps the lights on. 1996, a company most Americans have never heard of buys a company most Americans have never heard of. Packer Incorporated of Bellevue, Washington, the parent of Kenworth and Peterbilt, pays $543 million for DAF trucks. By then, DAF's moving over 24,000 trucks a year in Europe with about 5,000 people. The most American truck operation on earth now owns the Dutch survivor of the worst collapse in its history, and almost nobody in America notices it happen. But rewind 2 years, because there's a detail buried in the wreckage that decides everything that comes next. In 1994, DAF unveiled the biggest truck it had ever built, the 95.500 Super Space Cab, and under it sat an engine that wasn't DAF's, a Cummins 14-liter, 507 horsepower, a big American 6 with a low lugging bellow. DAF's own flagship ran an American engine because DAF's own engine couldn't reach the top of the market. And so with that, Packer just paid $500 million for a truck company that had to buy its biggest engine from somebody else. That was about to change, and the change would end up under the hood of your Kenworth. (1997), the first flagship of the American era rolls out. The DAF XF, built on the 95's cab architecture, the same bones and NASA helped draw a decade back. It's the platform that carries DAF to the top of the British market and onto the bestseller lists of a half dozen countries besides. New owner, same engineering DNA, and Packer's about to spend 17 years figuring out what it actually bought. 1998, Packer buys Leyland Trucks, putting both halves of the 1993 wreck back under one roof, reassembled from Bellevue, Washington, and the invisible brand starts winning. 2007, the DAF XF 105 is named International Truck of the Year. A Dutch truck under American ownership, cleaning up at Europe's biggest truck award, and America still isn't looking. No idea it owns any of this. Here's what to keep your eye on. For decades, Packer has bought its engines, from Cummins, from Caterpillar, from Detroit Diesel. It builds the truck. Somebody else builds the heart of it. And DAF's been buying from Cummins too. You just saw it, the 95.500 flagship, with an American 14-liter under the cab. Two truck companies under one owner, both renting the most important part of the machine from outside. Somebody in Eindhoven is about to fix that, for both of them. Because here's the hole in Packer's business. It doesn't control its own powertrain, and one of those three suppliers is Cummins, the company whose engine DAF had to borrow to reach the top of its own range, because DAF's own 11.6-liter couldn't make the flagship's numbers. If either company's ever going to own its future, one of them has to build an engine that can. 2005, the Packer MX, developed by DAF, built at the Eindhoven factory, and it's the answer to everything the last two chapters set up. 12.9 liters, inline 6, a deep, even thrum engineered, not brute. Bore and stroke 130 by 162 millimeters. 405 to 510 horsepower. 1450 to 1850 pound-feet. 2,600 pounds dry with a B10 design life of 1,000,000 miles. 90% run that far before a major overhaul. It goes into every heavy DAF, and then it goes somewhere nobody expected. Into Kenworths and Peterbilts. DAF says the MX now goes into more than 40% of every Kenworth and Peterbilt built. The men who run the plant that assembles them put the figure in tractors at just under half. And in 2010, Packer opens a $400 million plant in Columbus, Mississippi for one purpose: building this Dutch engine for Kenworth and Peterbilt. Its first job was simpler than that. It took MX engines built in Eindhoven and reconfigured them for American trucks. So ask it one last time. Would DAF had survived if it had been American? Turns out it didn't have to be. The engineering emigrated on its own. The competence DAF started building in 1957 that couldn't power its own flagship in 1994 now sits in the exact seat Cummins used to hold inside American trucks. And this is where the triumph curdles. Look back at the dates. Packer buys DAF in November 1996. 8 weeks later, the 17th of January 1997, DAF, Daimler, Iveco, Volvo, and MAN begin colluding. The Commission's own decision states it. Packer Incorporated of Bellevue, Washington, exercised decisive influence over DAF Trucks NV from that day until the 18th of January 2011. The first day of the cartel to the last. Not for a year, for 14 of them, clear through 2011 across the entire European economic area. The 5 biggest truck makers on the continent fixing prices. And not just list prices, they colluded on when to roll out the emissions tech European law demanded, Euro 3 through 6, and how much of that cost to hand the customer. Every hauler who bought a cleaner truck to obey the law paid a number 5 manufacturers had agreed on in advance. On the 19th of July 2016, the Commission drops the hammer. 2.93 billion euros in fines, the largest cartel penalty in its history. Daimler takes the biggest single hit. DAF's share is 752.7 million euros, and it lands not only on DAF in Eindhoven, but jointly on its American parent, Packer of Bellevue, Washington. The company that builds your Kenworth is a named party to the biggest price-fixing case in European history. The collusion was in Europe. A U.S. operator wasn't overcharged by it, but his truck's banker was fined €750 million for it. And the one company that paid nothing? MAN, because MAN went to the commission first and turned the whole thing in. And even the engine story isn't the clean revenge it looks like. Open up a DAF LF today and look at what's turning. A Packer PX5, 4.5 liters, up to 210 horsepower. Or a PX7, 6.7 liters, up to 310. Both started life as Cummins engines with a Packer badge on the rocker cover. Rebadged ISBs, the little one stretched out of a Cummins 3.8, DAF says the current generation has been redesigned in-house. And the bloodline is Cummins either way. The DAF had been buying Cummins 4s and 6s for the LF since about 1999, years before the MX existed. In June 2006, Packer took that European arrangement and shipped it west. Cummins 6 and 8 liter engines, badged Packer, exclusive to Kenworth and Peterbilt medium-duty trucks from the 1st of January 2007. So, DAF took Cummins' seat at the top American trucks and handed Cummins the bottom of them. The engine made it to America, so did the little truck. The LF crossed over wearing a Peterbilt badge, sold as the 220, and a Kenworth badge, sold as the K270. The thing that never came was the big one. And that was never a law. It was a decision made by the same company that now owns your Kenworth. Back to where we started. That MX-13 on the chain in an American service bay, oiled down the block. Same engine you saw at the top of this. Only now you know where it came from and what it cost to get here. So where does DAF stand in 2026? 13.5% of Europe's 16-ton and up market. It leads Britain at 27.7% and the Netherlands at 25.6%. In Bulgaria, it's the biggest heavy tractor brand on the road. In 2021, when the EU reopened its truck dimension rules, DAF went through the door with a new cab and finally retired the old one. The cab tech shell it had drawn with NASA back in 1987. 34 years on the road, the cab the Spanish helped design outlasted the company that designed it. And since May, the XG Plus Electric has been in series production at Eindhoven on Packer's EX-D2 driveline. 350 kilowatts, 480 horsepower, and over 500 kilometers of range. Its platform sisters, the XD and XF Electric, took International Truck of the Year in 2026. So why can't you buy one? Now the easy answer is the law. The Clean Air Act bans importing a truck that doesn't meet EPA standards. Anything under 25 years old has to clear federal safety rules it was never built for. DAF builds to European emissions and dimensions, so it's illegal. Case closed, except it isn't. Because the law doesn't stop Packer, it stops you. 2013, Packer opens a DAF plant at Ponta Grossa, Brazil. $320 million, 569 acres, building DAFs for South America. 2018, it starts building DAF at Bayswater, Melbourne, on a dedicated line inside the same factory where it builds Kenworth for Australia. Same roof, Kenworth down one line, DAF down the other. 1,100 dealers on every continent on Earth except one. And the bill from the cartel is still coming due. The 15th of September 2025, the Court of Appeal in Ghent upholds the liability of DAF Trucks and Packer's European finance arm, throws out every ground of appeal, and fixes the overcharge at 7.5%, telling them to pay. Back in 2023, DAF settled with transport operators for 550 million euros. The claims haven't stopped. This May, Germany's federal court cleared the way for a 500 million euro collective action covering 3,000 hauliers and 70,000 trucks. 752 million in fines, 550 million in settlements, and still counting. So here's the verdict, straight. DAF had to be broken apart, sold off, and bought by the one country it now hides from, before it could become the best-selling truck in Britain and the hidden heart of an American Kenworth. It was never the law and never the logistics. Packer already builds DAF in the Western Hemisphere. It already builds DAF beside Kenworth under one roof in Melbourne. It just won't do both in the same place at the same time on the one continent where it matters. It runs Kenworth and Peterbilt for North America and DAF for everywhere else, and keeps them apart on purpose. The engine was allowed across. The badge never was. That MX-13 on the hoist is still turning. It'll go back in the Kenworth, and the driver will never know he's running Eindhoven. DAF never built a bad truck. It just never got to own itself. So be honest, have you ever actually seen a DAF on a road in this country? And should American fleets be allowed to run one? Tell us in the comments.